Eighth grade. Today in science class, we're going to continue our study of atomic structure and chemical bonds and look specifically a little bit more in depth at ionic and covalent bonds. Today we're going to look at the video that is posted on Google Classroom in which you're going to learn more about these types of bonds, ionic and covalent bonds, and how they're given this analogy of being a relationship. Then you're going to complete this enrichment activity. So go back and watch the crash course video first before you're watching this so that you have a complete understanding and more background knowledge on how ionic and covalent bond works. Also connected to what we learned in Chapter 6, Lesson 2, how elements bond. Then at this point, we'll be able to put these pieces together. Let's get into our reading for today. Many of the foods we eat include some kind of additive. Sometimes additives are used to improve the appearance of food, as is quite often the case with fruits. For example, antioxidants are added to cut fruits so that they won't turn brown as quickly as they would otherwise. In addition, desserts and soft drinks often have artificial sweeteners added to them to keep the overall caloric count low without adversely affecting the taste. Basically, if you take the sugar out of something, it's not going to be as sweet, so you have to find these alternative or artificial sweeteners to keep having that sweet flavor that people like and enjoy. A common cure. People have been using food additives for centuries. Before refrigeration, people used to pickle or cure their foods to keep the food from spoiling. While pickling and curing still takes place, the refrigerator and freezer have made these methods less of a necessity than they once were. A common ionic substance, curing salt, is used to help preserve ham, bacon, sausage, and most other cured meats. At first, this was thought to be a wonderful way to reduce the risks of botulism, which is extremely dangerous. As this time went on, however, scientists discovered that the very ionic properties that prevent the growth of bacteria also cause cancer. Trouble with nitrates. The ion nitrate used in curing is converted to the nitrate by enzymes or bacteria. The nitrite then prevents the bacteria from growing. Both nitrite and nitrate help in producing the pinkish color in some meat. Unfortunately, nitrite also interacts with a substance called amine. Amine is found in all meats. When nitrite and amine react at high temperatures, they produce a group of chemicals called nitroamines. Nitrosamines have been found to cause cancer in every species of animals because they have been tested on. In order for the chemical reaction that produces nitrosamines to take place, the meat must be cooked at a very high temperature. Any meat that is fried is at a greater risk of having nitroamines produced. Now, I'm reading this not to scare you away, but to see in the real world where ionic and covalent bonds are used in foods, in specifically food additives, that sometimes that's not necessarily healthy to have these things that can be preserved for a really, really, really long time, because here you've got reactions that are happening within those meats that could potentially be cancer causing or carcinogens. It's another word for cancer causing, a carcinogen. To avoid that, you've got to make sure that when you're cooking something that it's cooked at the appropriate temperature. If you've ever used a meat thermometer, there's different indicators on there for where that temperature needs to be at for that meat before you're going to take it off the grill or off of the oven stove, because it needs to be at that level to kill the bacteria that would be causing this type of difficulty. It's not to scare you away from these things, just a reminder to obviously eat healthy and cook properly, not to have things that are undercooked in that way. Back to our question. Number one, why are food additives used? To answer this appropriately, you're probably going to write something like this. Food additives are used to help foods keep a nice appearance and to keep them from spoiling. A lot of times additives are used to help them be preserved because some of the different foods, such as fruits, might be traveling from different parts of the world to get to other places where those fruits don't naturally grow, such as your grocery store. You go walk in there and that marketplace is full of wonderful things that grow in other parts of the world. Well, to keep those things as fresh as possible for as long as possible, you've got to sometimes use additives to preserve them. Number two, how was most food preserved in the past and what inventions changed that? Number two, you might write something like this. Curing and pickling were used in the past, but the invention of the refrigerator and freezer made these methods less necessary. So previously, they had to use different types of curing and pickling to preserve the different types of food from spoiling. Now you've got the invention of a refrigerator, which keeps them at a lower temperature, which again slows down that bacterial growth or slows down that degenerative process, and a freezer that almost completely halts that process to where it can be kept for a lot longer time period. Number three, why are nitrates used to help preserve foods? Probably right. The ion nitrate used in curing is converted to nitrite. Nitrite prevents the growth of bacteria. Obviously, we don't want bad things to be growing on our food, even though bacteria is everywhere. The compound nitrite prevents certain types of bacteria from growing. Number 4, is it accurate to say that curing salts are both beneficial and harmful? Why or why not? You'd probably say yes, because curing salts are both beneficial and harmful. They help prevent bacteria from growing, but they can also cause chemical reaction to take place, which creates nitrosamines, and nitrosamines have been found to cause cancer or are carcinogens. So if they're not cooked appropriately after these nitrates are used, there could be cancer-causing products in the food that you're consuming. If it's cooked appropriately, a lot of times those things are cooked off and those bacteria are eliminated as well. So here's an application of how ionic and covalent bonding is in almost everything that we do in terms of our food that we're eating, because of those additives and because of the ways in which we're trying to preserve those things for the longest appropriate time. Hopefully you had a good chance to fill those items in. You're writing in your complete sentences. Thanks for following along.